Why was everyone laughing at her? Why did their voices sound like gunfire, sharp, deliberate, meant to wound? The sun above forward operating base Chapman burned white, cutting shadows through the Afghan dust, the kind of heat that cooked metal and men alike. Through it walked a woman who did not belong, or so they believed. Rachel Mitchell's left leg dragged slightly with each step, the result of an old wound that refused to heal. The brace under her faded uniform caught the light, and that was all it took for the laughter to begin. "Hey, Gimpy!" Chief Martinez's voice tore across the compound. 200 pounds of arrogance and muscle wrapped in a multicam uniform. Why don't you hobble back to the kitchen and make coffee for the real warriors? Combat zones aren't playgrounds for cripples. The other SEALs laughed. Not all of them cruelly, some out of discomfort, others just following the leader. But it didn't matter. Laughter sounded the same either way. Rachel didn't stop walking. Her backpack was heavy, her steps uneven, but her gaze stayed forward. Lieutenant Kyle Harrison, their commanding officer, stepped from the group, the kind of man whose confidence came from being told since birth that he was the best. His rifle hung casually from his shoulder as he grinned at her. "Intel," he said mockingly, nodding at the patch on her sleeve. "From a desk jockey who can't even walk straight. Leave the real work to those of us who can actually fight." She turned then, slowly. Her dark eyes locked onto his, and for a moment his smirk faltered. There was something in her stare, a quiet, lethal intensity that didn't belong to a supply clerk. But the moment passed and he scoffed, turning away. They didn't know who she was. Not yet. Within 24 hours, the radio would scream words that would haunt them forever. And those same men who mocked her limp would owe their lives to it. The command center was colder inside, air-conditioned and stale. Rachel leaned against the doorframe for balance as she entered, clutching a manila folder, the result of 3 weeks of sleepless analysis. She had seen patterns in the patrol data no one else had noticed. Village evacuation, strange absences, changes in radio chatter. Something was building in Sector 7. She approached the table where Colonel Bradley stood surrounded by field officers, Harrison among them, arms crossed, wearing that same smirk. Maps covered the walls, red markers blooming like bloodstains across the province. "Sir," she began, her voice rough from disuse, "I need to show you something about Sector 7, I believe." Harrison moved to block her path, his tone sharp. "This is a tactical briefing, not story time. Cripples don't belong here." The word hit like a slap. But she'd been hit harder. "Lieutenant," Colonel Bradley said irritably, not even looking up from the map. "If she has logistics updates, she can file them with the S4. This meeting is for combat personnel." Combat, the word stung. She had once been that. But now she was a ghost in uniform. Rachel's hand tightened around the folder until her knuckles went white. She turned without another word, leaving the analysis on a checkpoint desk outside the command center. She knew no one would read it until it was too late. The sun hit her full in the face as she stepped out. The walk back to the supply depot felt longer than usual. Her damaged leg screamed with every step. The base was alive with movement, soldiers laughing, vehicles rumbling, helicopters roaring overhead. She had been part of that world once. Now she counted bullets while others fired them. A sound stopped her, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors. It pulled her backward through time. Suddenly, the Afghan dust wasn't under her boots anymore. She was on the ground, bleeding, ears ringing. The smell of cordite and burning rubber filled the air. Her left leg was mangled, a nightmare of blood and metal. Specialist Thompson, her spotter, was screaming for his mother. The IED had been perfect, waiting for their convoy like a patient predator. Her rifle had been thrown 20 feet away, useless. She remembered crawling toward Thompson, dragging herself through the dirt with her elbows, but he was already gone. The medics had called her lucky. Lucky that the shrapnel missed the femoral artery. Lucky to be alive. But luck wasn't the word she'd have chosen. "Third time this week," said a soft voice bringing her back. Rachel looked up. Corporal Elena Vasquez stood at the doorway of the supply depot, watching her clean the same M4 rifle for the third time. The young medic's expression was kind, curious, but careful. "You handle weapons like someone who's done more than inventory them," Elena said. Rachel reassembled the rifle without looking up. "Just maintaining equipment. That's my job now." The now lingered in the air between them. Elena didn't press. She'd seen enough soldiers like Rachel, those who wore ghosts behind their eyes. "How long were you in the field?" Elena asked finally, nodding toward Rachel's leg, her voice gentle, almost apologetic. 8 years, Rachel said after a pause. 8 perfect missions. Then one IED changed everything. She didn't mention the rest, the commendations, the kills, the missions erased from official records. That life was buried with Thompson at Arlington. The sound of helicopter blades rose again, louder this time. Elena turned toward the window. Harrison's SEAL team was gearing up, tight formation, smooth movements, the easy confidence of apex predators. Rachel's brow furrowed. "They're going to Sector 7, she murmured. Elena nodded. "Yeah, they got orders this morning." Rachel's face drained of color. "They can't go there, not today." Before Elena could respond, Rachel was moving, limping, almost running, pain forgotten. She reached the flight line just as the Blackhawks were spooling up. "You need to abort," she shouted over the roar. "Sector 7 is compromised." Chief Martinez saw her coming. His bulk moved to block her. "What's the matter, Gimpy? Jealous that we get to do the real work?" "Listen to me." She grabbed his vest, desperation cracking through her restraint. 7 clicks northeast of grid 38 Romeo, Quebec. There's a pattern. They're setting up something. Martinez shoved her to the ground. Her bad leg buckled, and she hit hard. The dirt stuck to her palms as she looked up at him through dust and humiliation. "Stay down where you belong," he sneered. "Leave the fighting to those who can stand up straight." The helicopter's downdraft threw sand into her face as it lifted off. Their laughter, louder than the engines, echoed long after they were gone. Rachel stayed there for a long moment, then whispered to the wind. "They're walking into a kill box." Master Sergeant Cole had seen it all from the motor pool. He approached quietly as Elena helped Rachel to her feet. "Strange scar," he remarked, nodding to the faint rope mark on her wrist. "Looks like fast rope burns, the kind you get jumping out of a chopper in a hurry." Rachel's eyes snapped to his. For a heartbeat, something dangerous flickered there. Cole studied her carefully, his mind turning over old stories. He'd heard whispers, rumors, of a woman sniper attached to Delta Force years ago. Ghost Eye, they'd called her. 312 confirmed kills. The deadliest shooter in Afghanistan. But Ghost Eye had died 2 years ago, killed by an IED. Hadn't she? 3 hours later, the radio screamed. "Contact, contact, troops in contact." Gunfire rattled over the airwaves, punctuated by panic. Rachel froze mid-step, clipboard clattering to the floor. The command center erupted. Officers barked orders, radios crackled, the quick reaction force scrambled. They're pinned down, taking heavy fire from elevated positions. Multiple casualties, sniper fire from the ridgeline. Rachel burst into the room, limping but unstoppable. "Grid 38 Romeo, Quebec 7521, she shouted. "They're in a horseshoe ambush, overlapping fields of fire from the ridge." Every head turned. How did she know that? Captain Morris pushed her toward the door. "We don't need supply clerks playing soldier. Get out before you're arrested." She planted her feet. "You don't understand. They've been setting this up for weeks. 7 shooters interlocking arcs. Your QRF will fly straight into it. Her voice trembled with urgency, but all she saw in their eyes was dismissal. Then, over the radio. Sniper fire, multiple precision shots, we're pinned. The sound of chaos and dying men filled the room. Rachel's heart pounded. She could hear it, the rhythm of trained shooters, not amateurs. She had to act. Before anyone could stop her, she turned and limped out into the heat. The armory door was guarded by a young Marine, proud and rigid. "Off limits to non-combat personnel," he recited, hand resting on his pistol. "Weapons are for warriors, not cripples who can't even stand straight." That word again, cripple. It echoed inside her head until it was drowned by another voice, Thompson's. "Target acquired. Win 3 clicks right, send it." She remembered his grin, his steady voice in her headset, the weight of the rifle in her hands. She remembered the feeling of control, of precision, of purpose. And she knew what she had to do. "I need to get in there," she said quietly. "Not happening," he replied, stepping closer. Then from behind, Elena's voice. "Emergency requisition, medical supplies." She flashed a clipboard. The guard hesitated just long enough for Rachel to slip through. Inside, the smell hit her, gun oil and steel. It was the scent of her old life. She moved straight to the back corner, to the weapon others had forgotten, the M24 sniper system. Bolt action outdated. But to her it was home. She inspected it with reverence, clean, maintained, ready. Her hands moved automatically, loading match-grade rounds, adjusting optics, checking zero. Every movement precise, controlled. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to bury. Behind her, Cole appeared in the doorway. "I know who you are," he said quietly. He handed her a range card, freshly drawn. "I was at Anaconda, watched you make that 2,100-meter shot, Ghost Eye." Rachel froze, the name cutting through her. "Ghost Eye's dead," she said softly. Cole nodded once. "Maybe, but those men out there need whoever you are now. Go do what you do best." She met his gaze for a long moment. Then she picked up the rifle, slung it across her back, and limped toward the tower. The stairs looked endless. 4 flights of rusted steel twisting up into the Afghan sky. Each one a reminder of how far she'd fallen from who she once was. Rachel gripped the railing with one hand, the M24 slung across her back, its weight familiar yet heavier than she remembered. Her damaged leg protested with every step. Nerves burned, joints locked. Breath came ragged, but she didn't stop. Not when men were dying. Not when ghosts of the past whispered, "You still owe him." The radio chatter reached her through open corridors. Bursts of gunfire, clipped orders, screams that never finished. 2 KIA, 3 wounded, snipers in the ridge. Negative medevac, LZ's too hot. Each transmission tightened the noose around her chest. She could see it all in her mind, the valley, the angles, the sun, the ambush she'd predicted, the pattern she'd begged them to see. Halfway up, her body betrayed her. Her leg seized, locking at the knee, pain like a knife up her spine. Rachel slammed a hand against the wall, gasping. She hated the weakness, hated the fragility that made every breath a fight. But pain was honest, it didn't lie like pity did. Below, footsteps echoed. Elena was climbing after her, carrying a med kit and something else, courage that didn't look like much, but meant everything. "Rachel, stop," the medic called. "You can't make it like this." Rachel didn't turn. "I don't need to make it easy, I just need to make it count." Elena reached her, breathless, pulled a syringe from the kit. "Nerve block, it'll give you maybe 30 minutes. After that, you'll collapse. Then I'll finish before 30. The injection hit deep. Cold fire spread through her hip, numbing agony into a tolerable hum. Rachel pushed off the railing and kept climbing. By the time they reached the top, The horizon was bleeding orange with sunset. The observation deck was bare, sandbags, a spotting scope, a radio, and a perfect view of hell. Through the haze, Rachel saw them. Harrison's team pinned in a shallow valley, surrounded on three sides. The terrain funneled bullets into them like rain into a basin. They'd chosen it for cover and walked into a trap. She set down the rifle case, unrolled the shooting mat, and breathed. The wind was steady from the west, 7 miles an hour. The sun's angle would expose the ridgeline for only minutes more. Her fingers moved automatically, bipod locked, scope aligned, bolts cycled. She was home again. Sergeant Willis stormed up the stairs, weapon drawn. "You can't be up here. You'll be court-martialed for this." Rachel didn't look at him. The scope swallowed her world, crosshairs, wind drift, angles, distance. "Step back, Sergeant," she said quietly. "You don't have authority." "Then arrest me after." Her voice was calm. "Right now, 7 men are bleeding out because no one believed me." Something in her tone froze him, not defiance, not panic, just absolute certainty. Through her scope, a shimmer caught her eye, sunlight bouncing from glass, a scope reflection. First shooter, 1,200 meters. He was good camouflaged in the rocks, his silhouette almost invisible. Almost. Rachel glanced at her watch. 6 minutes until the sun shifted again. She dialed the windage, adjusted elevation. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped to match the cadence she'd trained for years ago. 1 beat, 1 breath, 1 shot. Willis hovered behind her, torn between duty and awe. "Who are you?" he whispered. Rachel's finger rested on the trigger. Ghosts don't need introductions. The shot cracked like thunder. Through the scope, the sniper's body jerked, then still. 1,000 meters away, death arrived before the sound. The radio flared. "Enemy sniper down. Repeat, enemy sniper neutralized." Chaos on the channel, confusion, hope. Rachel didn't react. She was already working the bolt, chambering the next round. Another shimmer, another breath. Second shooter, 1,350 meters. He twitched when his partner went down. That was his mistake. The second shot came like punctuation. A clean exhale, a steady trigger pull, and another enemy dropped from the rocks. Willis just stared. Jesus Christ. Rachel kept her focus, her voice flat. "Language, Sergeant, he's not listening." He stepped closer, whispering like a man in church. "Ghost eye, your ghost eye." Rachel didn't deny it, didn't look away. She's supposed to be dead. "So are the men down there if I stop shooting." Another round slid home. The third shooter took longer. He was patient, disciplined. She respected that, but patience had a rhythm and she could hear his. When he shifted 2 degrees to check his sector, she fired. The bullet hit stone, ricocheted once and punched through his chest. "3 down," she murmured. Over the radio, voices broke through static. "Whoever you are, keep shooting. You're saving our asses." Harrison's voice cracked, unsteady, stripped of arrogance. Rachel didn't smile. There was no satisfaction in survival bought with blood. The last 4 shooters were harder. They stopped moving, gone still. She could sense them more than see them. Subtle gaps in the landscape, the unnatural silence of predators waiting to kill. The nerve block was fatting. Pain returned, bright and sharp. Elena hovered nearby, needle ready. "No," Rachel said, breathing through clenched teeth. "Pain keeps me sharp." The minutes bled together, 20, 30, 40. Below, Harrison's men were running out of time. Wounded cried out for medevac. The quick reaction force refused to move without sniper cover. Every second was a death sentence. Then movement. A bird startled from the rocks, wings flapping wildly. Rachel's crosshairs shifted. She didn't see the shooter. She didn't have to. Her gut knew. She fired. The radio confirmed it seconds later. That's 5 hostiles down." The sixth shooter tried something clever, climbing for higher elevation. It was good tactics, better than most Americans would have managed. But she saw the pattern of dust disturbed on the slope, the unnatural break in shadow. 1,520 meters, uphill, crosswind at 3 layers. Her legs spasmed, hands trembling with exhaustion. She took a breath so deep it hurt. "Thompson," she whispered, "wind 3 clicks right, send it." She squeezed. The bullet crossed a mile of thin air, climbed into the wind, and dropped exactly where she wanted it. 6. The last one, the leader, didn't move. A true professional, she could feel his discipline through the silence. He was waiting for her to shoot first, waiting to trace the muzzle flash. She stared through the scope, eyes dry, breath shallow. Time stretched into a thread that could snap with one blink. Below, the radio's desperation turned to pleading. "We're losing them, do something." Rachel's vision swam. Pain was a storm now, slamming through her nerves. Her hands were slick with sweat, the brace cutting into her thigh. She thought of Thompson again, the crater, the screams. If she hesitated now, more would die the same way. She took the risk. Fired into the shadows where logic said he'd be. Nothing. Fired again, nothing. Then on the 4th shot, a twitch. The faintest flicker of movement. A rifle barrel nudged an inch. She took her final breath. And ended him. 7. Silence. For a heartbeat, even the wind stopped. Then the radio erupted. All hostile snipers neutralized, area secure, QRF inbound. Rachel sagged back from the rifle, shaking uncontrollably. Elena was already beside her, calling for medics, but Rachel barely heard. Her world had narrowed to the smell of gunpowder and the thundering of her own heart. Down below in that cursed valley, helicopters were landing. The men who had mocked her limp were alive because of it. When the medevac touched down at Chapman an hour later, the base was electric with rumor. Someone had taken out 7 enemy snipers from the North Tower. Impossible shots, they said. Precision beyond reason. By the time Harrison stumbled off the Black Hawk, bleeding but breathing, the whispers had turned into truth. Ghost Eye was alive. He searched the crowd, found her descending the tower with Elena and Cole's help. Her uniform was dirty, torn, her brace bent from strain. She looked like a ghost made flesh, fragile, trembling, but alive. The crowd parted instinctively. Soldiers, Marines, contractors, all fell silent. Harrison approached slowly, the weight of realization heavy in every step. When he stopped before her, his voice cracked. "You saved us all." Then, in full view of everyone, Lieutenant Kyle Harrison of SEAL Team 6 went down on one knee. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry for everything." Rachel stared at him, at the arrogance stripped away, at the humility left behind, and spoke softly, her words cutting sharper than any bullet. "That's the point, Lieutenant. You shouldn't have to know who someone was to treat them with respect." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Even Martinez couldn't meet her eyes. The man who'd shoved her in the dirt earlier stood rigid, shame written across his face. "I didn't know," he stammered. "If I'd known who you—" "You'd have still mocked the next one," Rachel interrupted. "So learn from this. Treat everyone like they matter, because they do." Colonel Bradley arrived moments later, face pale, breath short. "Mitchell, Ghost Eye, your file says you were killed in action." "Guess it was exaggerated," she said wearily. "You had 312 confirmed kills before the IED. Today makes 319. He exhaled slowly, awe and regret mingling. "Why didn't you tell us?" She leaned heavily on Elena, her strength fading fast. "Because a sniper doesn't need recognition, sir. Only results." That night, as medics treated her for nerve flare-ups and exhaustion, the news traveled faster than any bullet. Everywhere from Kandahar to Fort Bragg, soldiers whispered the same thing. The limping woman at Chapman wasn't broken. She was Ghost Eye, the deadliest sniper the U.S. ever produced. And she'd just come back from the grave. The desert went quiet after the last shot. No gunfire, no shouts, just wind. For hours afterward, no one spoke above a whisper. Even the air around forward operating base Chapman seemed to hold its breath, afraid to disturb what had happened. Rachel Mitchell, Ghost Eye, sat on the edge of a hospital cot, her rifle beside her, her brace unbuckled. The metal dug deep into swollen skin, and yet she didn't remove it. The pain grounded her. It reminded her that she was still alive. Outside the tent, she could hear the buzz of generators, the shuffle of boots, the hush of voices speaking her name. Not Mitchell anymore. Not cripple, not clerk. Ghost Eye. A name she'd buried 2 years ago with her spotter and her past. She stared at the floor, the concrete stained with oil and blood. The IV in her arm pulsed slowly, painkillers numbing everything except her thoughts. The flap opened. Lieutenant Kyle Harrison stepped in. His uniform was torn and blood-stained, his left arm in a sling, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. He looked nothing like the man who'd mocked her in the morning, and when he saw her sitting there, fragile but steady, he froze. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy with everything that had gone unsaid. Then softly, Harrison broke it. "How did you know?" Rachel didn't look up. "I told you this morning." "No," he said, stepping closer. "Not that. I mean, how did you know the exact coordinates, the number of shooters, their positions? You weren't anywhere near the briefing. You couldn't have seen them." Rachel finally lifted her gaze. The fire in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by something deeper. "Because I've been watching those mountains every day for 6 months," she said quietly. "While you were laughing at me, I was studying patterns, patrol logs, civilian movement, weather changes. I knew where the enemy would come from because they've used those same valleys before. You just never noticed." Harrison stood still, shame carving lines into his face. "I thought you were broken," he said. "I am broken," she replied, "but broken isn't useless." Her words landed like a rifle shot, clean, final, impossible to ignore. He nodded slowly, the truth sinking in. "I want to learn," he said, "from you if you'll teach me." Rachel's lips curved into the faintest smile. "You want the cripple to teach you." "I want Ghost Eye to teach me," he corrected. Then, after a pause, "and Rachel Mitchell." Something in her softened then, but she hid it well. She'd been a soldier too long to let kindness show easily. "Get some rest, Lieutenant," she said, looking away. "Tomorrow the real work begins." Outside, the base was alive again. Crews offloaded the wounded, medics ran stretchers through the dust, and commanders barked orders that carried an undercurrent of awe. Everyone knew now. The woman they dismissed as fragile had saved an entire SEAL team single-handedly. Colonel Bradley stood on the perimeter, his expression unreadable. He'd spent the last hour on encrypted calls with Kabul, then the Pentagon, trying to explain how a supposedly dead sniper had just altered the course of an entire operation. When he finally entered the medical tent, he paused at the threshold. Rachel didn't salute. She was too tired, but her posture said enough. "Mitchell," he said finally, his voice low, "or do I call you Ghost Eye now?" "Rachel's fine, sir." He exhaled heavily, stepping closer. "Why didn't you tell us? Your file says you were killed in action 2 years ago. Delta confirmed it. The entire community mourned you." She looked down at her hands, hands that still trembled when they weren't wrapped around a rifle. "Because Ghost Eye died in that crater, sir. What came back wasn't her." Bradley studied her face, the scar along her jawline, the tired resolve in her eyes. He'd seen soldiers like her before, the kind who kept fighting long after the war should have taken them. "You had 312 confirmed kills before the IID," he said quietly. "Today makes it 319. That's the highest in U.S. military history. Numbers do mean much when they come with names, sir. That stopped him. For the first time, Bradley understood the weight she carried. After a long silence, he said, "The Pentagon's already asking questions. They'll want interviews, commendations, probably a parade when this goes public." Rachel almost laughed. "Parades are for the ones who come home whole, sir, not for ghosts." Bradley's jaw tightened. "You earned more than pity. You earned respect, and that's something this command failed to give you." She didn't answer. Her silence said everything. The next day, the base woke to a different rhythm. People moved slower around her, quieter. Conversations stopped when she passed. Some saluted her out of respect, others out of guilt. Cole caught up with her near the motor pool. "Chapman never been this quiet," he said. "Hell, even the cooks are whispering." Rachel managed a thin smile. "They'll get over it." He studied her for a long moment. "You know, I was at Anaconda. I saw what you did that day. I thought it was luck." "It was." "No," he agreed. "It never is." They stood together for a moment, watching the mountains in the distance, the same ridges that had nearly swallowed the SEAL team whole. "You're not going back to the supply depot, are you?" Cole asked finally. Rachel shook her head. "No, there's something else I need to do first." That something took the form of a classroom 2 weeks later. It used to be a storage room, bare walls, fluorescent lights, a lingering smell of oil and gunpowder. Now it had 12 students sitting at makeshift desks, rifles propped beside them, notebooks open. Rachel limped to the front of the room, cane tapping against the concrete. She wore simple fatigues, no rank insignia, no medals, just her name tape, Mitchell. When she spoke, her voice was steady, stripped of emotion. "Forget everything you think you know about long-range shooting." The students straightened. Among them were Harrison, Martinez, and 3 other SEALs who'd survived Sector 7. They looked uneasy, like men standing in church. "I'm not here to teach you how to pull a trigger," Rachel continued. "You already know that. I'm here to teach you how to think, how to see, how to understand what the enemy sees before they act." She picked up a marker and drew a crude map of the valley where the ambush had taken place. "The Taliban sniper team that hit you was trained, foreign advisors, likely ISI. They were smart, disciplined, and patient, but they made 3 mistakes." She paused, letting the silence hang. "Can anyone tell me what they were?" No one answered. Even Harrison, who'd been there, said nothing. Rachel capped the marker. "That's why we're here." The Ghost Eye course, as they started calling it, became legend before it even had a name. Rachel's teaching style was brutal but methodical. She forced her students to unlearn the heroics they'd grown addicted to. No grandstanding, no chest thumping. "Every bullet tells a story," she would say. "Your job is to make sure it ends the way you intend." She taught them how to read wind from dust trails and bird patterns, how to predict sniper nests by the way shadows moved on ridgelines, how to fight through pain, not by ignoring it, but by making it part of the rhythm. By week 3, even Martinez, the same man who'd called her, staying after class, reviewing range cards long into the night. One evening he approached her with a folded piece of paper. "I wrote you something," he said awkwardly, "an apology." Rachel took it but didn't open it. "If you want to make it right, Chief, don't apologize, change." He nodded slowly. "I will." And he did. By the end of the month, something had changed across Chapman. The jokes stopped. The looks of pity turned into nods of respect. Soldiers who once dismissed the wounded now sought them out for guidance. Rachel had started a ripple effect, one that couldn't be stopped by rank or regulation. Her legs still ached every morning. Her limp never faded. But every time she walked across the base, she did so with purpose. Ghost Eye wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a teacher. Weeks later, Colonel Bradley called her into his office. A colonel from JSOC was waiting inside, his uniform crisp, his expression tight. "Mitchell," the JSOC officer began, sliding a folder across the desk. "The Pentagon's offering you 3 options: full reinstatement to active sniper duty, instructor position at the Special Operations Target Interdiction Course stateside, or medical retirement with full honors." Rachel opened the folder, scanning the documents. Her name looked strange printed under active status. She looked up. "You want me to go home?" The colonel hesitated. "They want to make an example of you, a hero, something for the cameras." Rachel closed the folder. "I'm not a hero, I'm a soldier, and I'm staying here." Bradley's lips twitched in something close to a smile. "I thought you'd say that." She handed the folder back. "If I'm teaching, I'll teach here. These soldiers need it more than anyone." The JSOC officer frowned. "You're declining federal honors." "I'm declining distractions." There was nothing more to say. That night, she stood on the same tower where she'd made the 7 shots. The wind whispered through the cracks in the sandbags. The mountains stretched endless and dark beneath the stars. Alina joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "They want to give you a medal," she said. "Silver Star for the rescue, maybe higher." Rachel took the cup, staring into the black horizon. "Tell them I'm busy. There's a war on." Alina smiled faintly. "You really hate attention, don't you?" Rachel's eyes softened. "Attention fades. What you teach someone, that stays." She looked out over the valley, the same valley where arrogance had almost buried good men, and whispered, more to herself than anyone, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." The words hung in the cold air like a prayer, fragile and unshakable. The rumor spread faster than gunfire. By the 2nd month, soldiers across Afghanistan were talking about the Ghost Eye course, a mysterious sniper training program that turned arrogance into precision and rookies into thinkers. No one outside forward operating Base Chapman knew much, only that the instructor was a woman with a limp, and that those who trained under her started surviving missions that should have killed them. Inside the converted storage room that served as her classroom, Rachel Mitchell drew another map on the whiteboard. Her handwriting was clean, surgical. Lines, coordinates, elevations, every detail mattered. 1,200 meters, she said, tapping the board with her marker. Crosswind at 9 o'clock, temperature 102 Fahrenheit. What's your shot correction? One of the students, a young Marine corporal, hesitated. .2 mils left. Rachel tilted her head. If you make that correction, Corporal, you'll miss by 4 inches, which means your target will live long enough to kill one of your friends. Try again. The classroom fell silent. Sweat trickled down the Marine's temple. He recalculated in his notebook, mumbling to himself. .15 mils left. Rachel nodded once. Now you hit center mass. She turned to the rest of the class. Perfection isn't about ego, it's about margin. In this business, an inch is the difference between a headline and a folded flag. No one laughed. They'd all seen too many folded flags. After class, Harrison stayed behind. His posture was different now, humbler, focused. The cocky SEAL officer who once called her cripple was gone. What stood in his place was a man rebuilding himself from the inside out. "Chief Martinez wants to know if he can audit tomorrow's session," he said. "He's been training extra hours on the range." Rachel smirked faintly. "The same chief who shoved me into the dirt." Harrison smiled awkwardly. "Yeah, that one. Tell him to bring coffee, black, and tell him to be ready to shoot left-handed." "Left-handed?" Harrison blinked. "He's right-handed." "So was I," Rachel said quietly, "until the blast tore through my arm nerves. If he's going to understand pain, he needs to feel it even for an hour." Harrison didn't argue. He just nodded. There was respect now, the kind that came from seeing truth under fire. That evening, as dusk bled across the mountains, Rachel limped toward the watchtower. Her leg burned, the brace biting into scar tissue, but she forced herself up the stairs anyway. Pain was a constant companion now, not an enemy, a reminder that she was still in the fight. From the top, she could see the base laid out like a breathing organism, vehicles moving like blood through arteries, lights flickering like neurons in the dark. The same place where they had once mocked her limp. Now they saluted her when she passed. Cole joined her a few minutes later, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. He offered one without a word. "They're saying your course cut sniper casualties by 70% in the past month," he said. Rachel sipped slowly. "That just means they're paying attention." Cole chuckled. "No, it means they're scared of you." "They should be," she said, but there was no pride in it, only truth. She set the mug down, eyes locked on the ridgelines. "You ever think about the ones we didn't save, Cole? The ones whose names no one remembers?" He sighed. "Every night." Rachel nodded. "Good, never stop. That's how we keep from becoming monsters." The next day, Chief Martinez arrived early. He didn't swagger this time. He stood by the door, hat in hand, waiting like a student. When Rachel entered, she gave him a long look, measuring not his strength but his sincerity. "Chief," she said, voice level, "do you still think combat zones aren't for cripples?" He swallowed hard. "No, ma'am. I think combat zones are where the strong prove what that word really means." "Good," she said. "Grab a rifle." For the next hour she pushed him through a left-handed shooting drill that left his shoulders screaming and his shots wide. He missed again and again. By the end, his arms trembled, sweat soaking his collar. Rachel stepped beside him, adjusting his stance. Her touch was firm, professional. "You see now, when your body fights you, discipline keeps you on target. That's what pain teaches, discipline." He nodded, panting. "I get it now." "No," she said softly, "you're starting to." When the class ended, Martinez lingered. He handed her an envelope, folded, creased, written by hand. "I wrote this before I knew who you were," he said. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know I understand now." Rachel didn't open it. "If you really understand, Chief, don't change for me. Change for the next one like me." That night, she found the letter under her pillow. She didn't read it, not yet. By the 3rd month, the Ghost Eye course had grown beyond Chapman. Other bases requested her methods, her data, her training materials. She refused to travel, her body couldn't handle it, but she sent recordings, diagrams, lessons written in precise military shorthand. Her words traveled farther than she could. She became a myth even while still alive. The woman who taught broken soldiers how to fight again. The sniper who turned her scars into a doctrine. Across Afghanistan, wounded veterans began re-enlisting as trainers and analysts, inspired by her example. Hospitals displayed her photo, not smiling, not posing, just her in uniform, rifle at her side, standing crooked but proud. "Strength," one caption read, "isn't the absence of pain, it's the mastery of it." Then one morning, a chopper brought a visitor. Colonel Bradley met Rachel outside her classroom. His face was grave. "You're not going to like this," he said. She arched an eyebrow. "If it involves politics, you're right." "It involves the Pentagon." He handed her a black folder stamped classified, EYES only. The kind of document that made even veterans go silent. Rachel flipped it open. Aerial images, satellite data, a target grid in eastern Syria. A single notation scrawled across the bottom. "Ghost Eye Voluntary Mission, highest clearance." She closed the folder. "They're calling me back in." Bradley nodded. "They want you to oversee a surgical strike. Intelligence says an ISIS leader resurfaced in Deir ez-Zor. No margin for error. They want one shot." Rachel looked out at the training field where her students were drilling. "You have other snipers." "Not like you." "Then they'd better learn fast," she said, handing the folder back. Bradley hesitated. This isn't just about a shot, Mitchell. They need a symbol. After the ambush story went public, Ghost Eye became a name they can't ignore. The world thinks you're invincible. Rachel's eyes hardened. Then tell them the truth, I'm not. That night she sat alone in her quarters. The lights were low, the air thick with the smell of sand and gun oil. On her desk lay two photographs. One of her and Thompson, smiling, unbroken before the blast. The other of her last sniper class, standing proud under a hand-painted banner. Ghost Eye Course, Class 3. The two photos told the story of a life split in half, before and after. Alina entered quietly, holding a clipboard. You got the orders. Rachel nodded. Eastern Syria. Are you going? Rachel didn't answer right away. Her gaze stayed fixed on Thompson's photo. When we were partners, she said softly, he used to say something before every mission. We don't choose the fight, Ratch. We just choose not to look away. Alina sat beside her. You've done enough, you've earned peace. Rachel looked at her hand, steady, calloused, scarred. Peace doesn't come from sitting still, Alina. It comes from finishing what you were made to do. At dawn, she walked to the flight line, gear packed, rifle slung over her shoulder. A small crowd had gathered, her students, her comrades, her skeptics turned believers. Harrison stood front and center, clean-shaven but pale, one arm still in a brace. Ma'am, he said, voice steady but thick with emotion, how long will you be gone? Rachel adjusted the strap on her rucksack. Until it's done. Martinez stepped forward, holding out a small embroidered patch, the insignia of SEAL Team 6. Something to remember us by, he said. Rachel took it, folding it into her palm. I already remember. She turned to Cole. Keep the course running. He grinned faintly. You really think anyone can run it like you? No, she said simply, but they'll try, that's enough. The aircraft's engine spooled up, drowning their voices. As she climbed the ramp, her legs screamed in protest, but she didn't stop. Each step was a victory. Each breath a promise. When she reached the top, she turned back once. Her students lined up on the tarmac, saluting her as the engines thundered. Then she disappeared inside the C-130, swallowed by light and dust. The aircraft lifted off, vanishing into the dawn. And for the first time in months, forward operating base Chapman felt empty again. That night, Alina stood on the tower, watching the fatting contrail disappear into the horizon. The wind whispered across the sandbags. She'll be fine, Cole said beside her. She's Ghost Eye. Alina didn't smile. She's human, she said quietly, and that's why she's not done yet. The desert smelled different in Syria. Drier, thinner, like dust burned into air. When Rachel stepped off the C-130, the heat hit her first, then the silence. No cheers, no greetings, just the faint hum of machinery and the watchful eyes of soldiers who had heard her name whispered like a rumor. She didn't wear medals or insignia. Just fatigues, brace, rifle case, and a quiet authority that didn't need announcing. A captain approached, saluting sharply. Ma'am, welcome to Al-Shaddad Forward Base. Colonel Pike is waiting in tactical. Rachel nodded, gripping her duffel. Her leg already throbbed from the flight, but she ignored it. Pain was background noise now, constant, familiar, almost comforting. Inside Tactical Command, a dozen screens flickered with satellite feeds. Colonel Pike looked up from a map table as she entered. A big man, broad shoulders, sandpaper voice. Ghost Eye, he said, like the name was both prayer and warning. Didn't think the legend still breathed. Depends on the day, Rachel said. He gestured to a screen. A high-resolution image showed a compound carved into rock, the Deir ez-Zor outpost. Around it, miles of empty desert and shifting dunes. High-value target, Pike said. Called Al-Mahdi, logistics chief for what's left of ISIS's regional cell. He's been hiding under civilian cover, but intel confirms he's back on site. Window of exposure, 23 minutes at dawn. Rachel studied the image, calculating distances. Range from Overwatch. 1,600 meters, Pike said. Crosswind unpredictable. You'll have one shot before they scatter. Team. None, Pike said. They want zero footprint. Drone feed only. You'll be airdropped 2 clicks west. Extraction in 40 minutes after trigger confirmation. Rachel's eyebrow lifted. No spotter. Pike hesitated. They said you don't need one. She stared at him a long moment, then zipped the folder shut. Everyone needs one. He didn't argue. Maybe because something in her tone said this wasn't pride, it was truth. The next morning, she checked her rifle piece by piece. The M2010 ESR, custom optics, carbon suppressor, hand-balanced barrel. It wasn't the same rifle she'd used in Afghanistan, but the spirit was there. Each scratch on the receiver told its own quiet story. As she assembled it, she spoke softly, almost like a prayer. Breathe slow, count your heart, don't chase the shot, let it come. Beside her, a young comms operator named Lynn looked nervous. He couldn't have been older than 22. Ma'am, is it true you made a 1.5-mile shot without a spotter? Rachel didn't look up. No one makes a shot alone. There's always a ghost watching your shoulder. Lynn blinked. You mean your spotter? Her hands paused. Yeah, she said quietly, something like that. The night before insertion, Rachel barely slept. The tent buzzed with distant generators, the air heavy with heat and memory. She reached into her duffel and pulled out an old patch, faded, worn. The SEAL Team 6 insignia Martinez had given her before she left. She ran her thumb over it, remembering his voice. Something to remember us by. Her leg ached, the scar tissue tightening as the temperature dropped. She massaged it gently, grimacing. The doctors had said one more field mission might cripple her permanently. Maybe they were right. Maybe that was the price of finishing. They launched before dawn. The desert below was a canvas of shadows and faint blue light. The helicopter's rotors beat like a pulse against the horizon. Rachel sat in silence, eyes closed, headset resting around her neck. When the pilot's voice crackled through the comms, drop in 30, she opened her eyes and looked at the horizon. It was strange how the world could look so peaceful seconds before it turned violent. The ramp opened. Wind roared. Rachel stepped into it without hesitation. Her parachute bloomed silently above her. Below, the desert spread endless and indifferent. She landed with a controlled roll, biting back a grunt as her bad leg struck sand. The impact sent white pain flashing up her spine. She froze, breathing through it until the wave passed. Then she moved. Always move. That was Rule 1. She reached her overwatch position with 43 minutes until dawn. The ridge offered perfect elevation, 1,592 meters from target. She set up the rifle, checking scope alignment, wind vectors, temperature. Her breath came shallow but steady. Through her earpiece, Pike's voice came low. Drone confirms target entering courtyard. ETA to visual window, 3 minutes. Rachel adjusted her scope, zooming in. The compound was quiet, shadows long. Guards moved with predictable rhythm. Then there he was. Khalid al-Mahdi. Gray beard, thin build, standing by a truck giving orders. She steadied her rifle. Visual confirmed, she whispered. Target ID 01. Copy, Pike said. Drone tracking, you're green on engagement. Rachel exhaled slowly. Wind, 4.2 mph from southwest. Distance, 1,598 meters. Drop, 22.3 inches. She made the adjustments by feel. Each click of the turret was like a heartbeat. Her finger rested on the trigger. Then movement. A child. Running into frame. A boy, maybe 10, carrying a bucket of water. He crossed directly between her scope and the target. Rachel froze, her pulse spiked. Command, she said quietly. Civilian interference, holding shot. Static, then Pike again, sharper. Negative hold, window closing. Negative, she said firmly. I've got a kid in my scope. Ghost Eye, if he gets in that truck, he's gone for good. Rachel's jaw clenched. The crosshairs danced over the child's shoulder. One squeeze and the world would never know the difference, except her. No shot, she said flatly. The radio hissed. Pike swore under his breath. Understood, wait for clear. The boy disappeared inside the compound. Seconds later, Maudie moved behind cover out of sight. Target lost. Rachel stayed prone, eyes glued to the scope, scanning every door, every shadow. Minutes passed. The horizon brightened. Finally, Maudie reappeared, heading for a convoy at the rear gate. Rachel recalculated quickly. New range, 1,642 meters. Crosswind had shifted 7.3 mph eastward. She dialed corrections, breath measured. Pike's voice returned. This is your last window, Ghost Eye. Do you have a shot? She didn't answer immediately. Her hands trembled slightly from pain. The brace cut deep, nerves flaring. But she lined up anyway. Her body might falter, but her focus never would. Affirmative, she whispered. She took one breath, then another. And squeezed. The rifle barked softly, recoil pushing into her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw Maudie stumble, then collapse. Target down, she said, voice flat, heartbeat steady. Drone feed confirmed. Cheers erupted in the command tent halfway across the desert. But Rachel didn't celebrate. She just stared through the glass at the lifeless figure. It never got easier. It never would. Extraction was late. By the time the helicopter arrived, the sun was high and the air rippled with heat. Rachel climbed aboard, her legs screaming. She stripped the bolt from her rifle, tucked it into her vest, and leaned back, eyes closed. Lynn's voice came through her earpiece. Ma'am, command says congratulations. They're calling this mission the Ghost's Dawn. Rachel's reply was quiet. Tell command it wasn't dawn for everyone. She could still see the boy in her mind. The bucket of water, the innocence that walked through a crosshair. Some victories didn't feel like victories. They felt like reminders. When she landed back at base, Pike met her with a handshake. You saved lives today, Ghost Eye, maybe thousands. Rachel nodded, unslinging her rifle. Then make it worth it. He frowned, meaning. Make sure we do something with the peace we buy. Don't just count kills. Count days when no one dies. Pike said nothing. He knew better than to argue with someone who understood the price of every trigger pull. That night, she sat alone on the runway. The desert was quiet except for the whisper of sand and the ticking of cooling engines. Alina's voice came over encrypted comms from Chapman. We saw the report. You did it. Rachel smiled faintly, still breathing. You sound tired. I am. There was a pause. Then Alina said softly, you did the right thing, Ratch. You didn't take the shot with the kid there. Rachel's smile faded. That's the problem, Alina. Doing the right thing never feels right. It just hurts less. She hung up, looked out at the stars. For a moment, she imagined Thompson sitting beside her, the ghost she carried. He was smiling, the way he always did before a mission. You did good, his voice said somewhere in her head. She exhaled, the ache in her chest easing slightly. I'm trying, she whispered back. Hours later, as the base slept, Rachel wrote a short note in her logbook. Mission 601, Deir ez-Zor, target neutralized. Civilian interference prevented premature shot. Lesson, clarity before speed, always. She underlined the last word 3 times. Then she closed the book and let herself rest for the first time in days. But in the distance, beyond the horizon, new fires were already lighting. New threats forming. And Rachel Mitchell, the woman who once limped through ridicule and came back a legend, would soon find that peace wasn't the end of her story. It was just the silence before the next storm. The briefing room felt colder than the desert ever did. Rachel sat across from three men in suits, Pentagon auditors, pale from office light and paperwork, not sun or sand. The walls hummed with fluorescent fatigue. They weren't soldiers. They were the kind who measured victories in spreadsheets. The older one adjusted his glasses, flipping through a thin folder. "Sergeant Mitchell," he began, "or do you prefer Ghost Eye?" "Rachel," she said evenly. He nodded. "Rachel, then. You neutralized called Almaty from a distance of approximately 1,642 meters, correct?" "Yes." "Confirmed by drone feed. Clean shot, minimal collateral." She said nothing. He looked up. "Minimal isn't zero. Our analysis shows a civilian casualty in the outer perimeter, a boy, approximately 10 years old." The words hit like shrapnel. Rachel's throat tightened. She'd seen the boy in her scope. She'd waited for him to clear. "That's not possible," she said quietly. "He was inside the compound." After the shot, the explosion from Mahdi's vehicle ignited fuel lines. The child was within the blast radius. She stared down at her hands, steady, scarred, trained to end lives, not to weigh them. "Collateral damage," another auditor murmured, reading from a tablet. Rachel's jaw clenched. "Don't use that word." The room fell silent. The lead auditor sighed, removing his glasses. "You've been in this long enough to know how we write reports, Sergeant. It's not personal." She looked up, eyes sharp. "It's never personal until it's your son in the debris." The man flinched. When she left the room, the sunlight hit her like a slap. Harsh, real. The air was alive again, not filtered through bureaucracy. She walked past the flight line, the hangars, the endless convoys of steel and noise. None of it mattered, not today. At the far edge of the base, a row of tents served as the temporary infirmary. She stopped outside one, watching medics tend to locals injured by crossfire from the previous night. An older Syrian woman sat near the entrance, face lined with dust and grief. A child's sandal rested in her lap. Rachel approached slowly. She didn't need translation. Grief didn't speak in language. She knelt, her bad leg shaking. "I'm sorry," she said softly, though the woman couldn't understand. The woman looked up, eyes hollow. She didn't shout, didn't curse. She just nodded once, the kind of forgiveness that didn't heal anything, only acknowledged the shared wound. Rachel stood again, unsteady. The world felt heavier than her rifle ever did. That night she didn't sleep. The command tent buzzed with celebration, promotions, commendations, the kind of hollow triumph that always came after blood. But Rachel sat outside under the open sky, the stars sharp as broken glass. Cole called from Chapman on secure comms. Heard the mission went clean. Rachel let out a humorless breath. Clean is a word officers use when they don't have to see what clean costs. He paused. "You sound like the old days." "Maybe I never left them." There was static, then his voice quiet and certain. "You did the right thing, Ratch." Rachel's fingers tightened around the comm. "The right thing doesn't erase the wrong outcomes. You can't carry every death." "I can," she said. "That's why I'm still useful." By morning, her orders came down. Return to Chapman for debrief and recovery. The flight back was silent. She sat near the rear, helmet in her lap, the hum of the engines filling the spaces where thoughts would have hurt too much. As the mountains of Afghanistan came into view, a strange calm settled over her. Home in its cruelest form. When she stepped off the plane, the base was buzzing again. Soldiers lined the runway, saluting. Someone had painted a sign on a hangar wall, "Welcome home, Ghost Eye." She hated it. Alina was waiting near the hangar, smiling despite the exhaustion on her face. "You did it," she said, handing Rachel a bottle of water. Rachel didn't answer. She just looked at the faces, the admiration, the pride, and felt nothing but the quiet ache of failure. Alina's smile faded. Ratch, what happened out there? Rachel's voice was barely audible. A boy died. Elena froze. Collateral. Rachel shook her head. Human. Days passed. The base moved on. Operations resumed. Soldiers went back to jokes and drills and dreams of home, but Rachel stayed apart, spending her hours in the observation tower. At night, she'd watch the ridgelines through her scope, not hunting, not training, just seeing, as if watching long enough could make sense of it all. Cole joined her one evening. You've been up here every night since Syria. She didn't look up from the scope. Old habits. He sighed. You're starting to scare the rookies. Good, she said. They should be scared. War's not supposed to feel normal. He leaned against the wall. You know what I think? What? I think you're not haunted by the ones you killed. You're haunted by the ones you couldn't save. Rachel's eye lingered on the horizon. You sound like Alina. She's right. Rachel finally turned to face him. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were storms. If pain's the price of remembering, I'll keep paying it. The day I stop feeling it is the day I stop deserving the uniform. Cole didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. 2 weeks later, Colonel Bradley summoned her to HQ. When she entered, she found not just him, but 2 other officers and a civilian intelligence advisor. Bradley looked tired. Rachel, we've got a problem. The intel advisor spoke. Your Syria mission stirred up heat. The civilian death been leaked to the media. Rachel stayed silent. They're framing it as negligence. Command's pushing a narrative that you fired prematurely, that you disobeyed an order. Bradley's jaw clenched. I know that's not true, but DC doesn't like ghosts they can't control. Rachel crossed her arms. They'll drag my name through mud to save their pride. That's how it's always been. The advisor nodded. You could clear your record if you went public, do interviews, tell your side. Rachel's laugh was hollow. You think I want cameras on this? You'll be seen as a hero. I'm not interested in being seen. Bradley looked down. They'll make you the scapegoat. Rachel met his eyes. Let them. If it makes them sleep better, I'll take the nightmares. That night she wrote a letter, the kind that wasn't meant to be sent. It began simply. To whoever reads this after I'm gone. Don't mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes it's restraint. Sometimes it's the only way left to keep your dignity intact. She stopped there, pen hovering. Then closed the notebook and tucked it under her pillow. The rain started before dawn. Not a storm, not yet, just a thin, cold drizzle that turned the Syrian dust into dark mud and made every sound feel distant. Rachel Mitchell sat in silence beneath the overhang of an abandoned hangar, her rifle broken down beside her, her leg wrapped in a compression sleeve. The mission was over, but the quiet after a kill was worse than the mission itself. Always had been. In the movies, victory had music. Out here it had ghosts. She stared into the distance, at a horizon that never seemed to move closer, and wondered if this was what the end of a career felt like. Not applause, not relief, but a slow, hollow ache. A voice broke her thoughts. Mind if I sit? Colonel Pike approached with 2 tin mugs of coffee. He handed one over, crouched beside her, and watched the rain like it might confess something. They're calling it a perfect operation, he said. 1 shot, 0 collateral. Washington's thrilled. You'll get another commendation. Rachel snorted softly. They didn't see the kid. Pike hesitated. Doesn't change what you did. You prevented a massacre. Doesn't erase it either. He nodded slowly. You know, most people dream of being a legend. You look like you've been punished with it. She smiled faintly, no humor in it. That's because legends don't get to rest, Colonel. They just get remembered until they break. Back at Chapman, the reaction was chaos. The report of her mission hit the Pentagon feeds within hours. A classified operation leaked. twisted by rumor and pride. Ghost Eye strikes again, read the headlines. American sniper, returns from the grave. Rachel saw the articles through a grainy laptop screen while still in the field. Her jaw tightened. The photographs, the ones she'd never posed for, were everywhere. Her limp, her scars, her stare, all turned into symbols she never wanted. She shut the laptop. The sound of it closing felt like the end of something fragile. 2 weeks later, she was flown to Ramstein Air Base in Germany for debriefing. The jet touched down under gray skis. Waiting at the hangar were suits, Pentagon officials, intelligence staff, journalists with press badges they weren't supposed to have. Rachel stepped off the ramp with her brace visible and her expression unreadable. Every camera tried to capture her face. Every flash reminded her of gunfire. A woman in a Navy suit approached. "Chief Mitchell, the secretary would like to personally thank you." Rachel walked right past her. "Tell the secretary I'm not a headline." The aide blinked. "Ma'am, this could inspire millions." Rachel stopped, turned slightly. "Then inspire them with the truth, not with ghosts." She left the cameras behind and walked straight to the barracks, refusing interviews, refusing debriefers who wanted clean quotes about honor and precision. There was no glory in killing, no matter how justified. There was only the question that came after: what now? That night she received a message from Alina, a secure transmission routed through 3 networks. "Heard what happened. The whole base is talking about you again. Harrison says the students are training twice as hard. They think you'll come back soon. Will you?" Rachel read it twice before replying. "Not yet. Tell them to keep training. Tell them the next war won't wait for me." She sent it, then stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before adding another line. "Tell Harrison I'm proud of him." Then she deleted it. Days turned to weeks. She stayed in Germany for physical therapy, but everyone knew it wasn't just her leg they were trying to fix. It was the rest of her. The therapists talked about nerve damage, balance, coordination. No one talked about silence, the silence that followed every shot. One morning her doctor, an older man with kind eyes, said, "You've hit your limit, Chief. Your leg can't handle another jump, another mission. If you go back out there, you'll lose it entirely." Rachel stared at the X-rays on the screen, thin white cracks where the bones refused to heal right. "Then I'll lose it standing," she said. He sighed. "Why do you always have to be the one who doesn't stop?" Rachel looked at him. "Because someone has to be." 3 months later, the Pentagon's media machine caught up to her. A formal award ceremony was scheduled. She was ordered to attend. The letter called it an honor. To her, it felt like a funeral. They held it in D.C., at a marble hall filled with lights, flags, and polished speeches. Generals in dress uniforms. Senators pretending to understand sacrifice. When her name was called, the crowd rose. Cameras clicked. A medal was placed around her neck. Rachel didn't smile, didn't speak. When they handed her the microphone, she paused, looking out at the crowd, polished, safe, distant from the noise of war. Then she said softly, "Pain doesn't end when the bullet hits the target. Sometimes it starts there." The room went silent. The words echoed through marble and pride like a warning. She set the medal on the podium, unclasped it from her neck, and left before applause could start. Outside, the night was cool and quiet. She stood beneath the monuments, stone giants carved to remember the dead. A man approached from the shadows. Not military. Civilian suit, thin tie, sharp eyes that didn't miss much. "Chief Mitchell," he said, "I represent an organization that studies unconventional warfare data. You've been quite an inspiration to our analysts." She gave him a sideways look. "Flattery wasted on me." "Not flattery, recruitment." Rachel frowned. "For what?" He handed her a small envelope. "For something new, something off books, something that might finally give your ghosts a home. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. It wasn't a battlefield, it was a classroom. Rows of wounded veterans, amputees, faces lined with pain and purpose. The man said, "We want you to train them, not for war, for survival, rehabilitation through precision. You'd be building the first advanced sniper cognition lab, civilian-backed, your way." Rachel looked down at the photo again. Dozens of men and women staring back, each one broken differently, yet alive. She closed the envelope slowly. No more killing. Only teaching. When she returned to Chapman 3 months later, she wasn't carrying a rifle. She carried a folder marked Project Reclaim. Her students were waiting for her on the tarmac. Harrison, Martinez, Cole, Elena. They looked older now, calmer. When they saw her step off the plane, they didn't cheer. They saluted quietly. Rachel walked up to them, her limp heavier than before but her eyes clear. "Where's the classroom?" she asked. Harrison grinned faintly. "We turned the old hangar into something better. Whiteboards, simulators, range feeds. We saved your seat." Rachel's lips curved. "Then let's get to work." The new program began small. 5 veterans, all wounded, some missing limbs, others missing hope. Rachel stood before them on day 1, cane in hand, voice calm and steady. "I'm not here to fix you," she said. "No one can, but I can teach you how to fight again, not out there," she pointed toward the distant ridges, "but in here." She tapped her chest. Every head lifted. By the end of the week, the base that had once mocked her limp now echoed with laughter and determination. Veterans teaching each other how to rebuild strength, how to find precision in imperfection. The Ghost Eye course had evolved. It was no longer about killing. It was about healing through focus, through purpose. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Harrison found her sitting on the same tower where it all began. He handed her a folded paper, the patch Martinez had once given her, now sewn into a piece of cloth signed by every one of her students. Rachel took it carefully. "What's this?" He smiled, proof that ghosts can still lead the living. She stared at the signatures, her throat tight. For once, she had no words. That night, as the base lights dimmed, she wrote her final entry in her logbook. "Mission complete. No targets, no enemies, only students. Lesson: you can't erase pain, but you can turn it into direction. Sometimes survival is the most precise shot of all." She set the book down, removed her brace, and lay back on the cot. Outside, the rain had stopped. The desert was silent. For the first time in years, so was she. It began with a whisper. A rumor again, just like it had all started years ago. They said Ghost Eye was leaving Chapman. No ceremony this time. No cameras. No headlines. Just a quiet exit before dawn, a single duffel, and a soldier's gate that still carried the weight of every battlefield she'd survived. But before she left, she had one final class to teach. The students gathered early in the hangar that had become something sacred. The walls still bore the chalk outlines of targets and equations she'd drawn by hand. Her voice had filled these walls for months, calm, precise, unyielding. Now silence filled the room instead. Rachel stood at the front, cane in hand, gaze sweeping over the dozen men and women seated before her. Every one of them carried scars, physical, emotional, invisible. Every one of them was still standing because of her. "Do you know why we shoot?" she asked softly. Harrison shifted. "To protect," he said. "Partly," Rachel replied, "but protection isn't enough. We shoot to remember." A few confused looks. She walked to the whiteboard, her limp steady, deliberate, picked up the marker. Wrote 3 words: control, patience, purpose. "These," she said, "are what define a sniper. Not aim, not speed, not kill count. Control keeps your fear from running you. Patience keeps your ego from blinding you. Purpose, She paused, looking at each of them. Purpose reminds you that even destruction can serve creation. No one spoke. Even the air seemed to wait for her next breath. Rachel smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes from surviving too much. "When I was your age," she said, "I thought glory lived in the trigger, that if I just hit enough targets, the noise in my head would quiet down. But all I did was replace one silence with another." She set the marker down. "If you take anything from me, take this. Your worth isn't in how steady your hand is, but in what you choose to steady it for." When class ended, no one moved. Some saluted, some stood in silence. Martinez, Harrison, Elena, they all knew this was her last lesson. Rachel didn't say goodbye. She just gave each of them a long, steady look, the kind of look that said everything words couldn't. Then she turned and walked out into the sunrise. Outside, the desert stretched endless and quiet. The morning air was cold, biting against her skin. She liked it that way. Cold meant clarity. Cole waited by the truck. He'd aged too, gray in his beard now, lines around his eyes. "You sure about this?" he asked. Rachel nodded. "There's a place near Kandahar, rehab center for vets. They want me to help start a focus program there." He smiled faintly, still teaching. "Always." He extended his hand. "Then it's not goodbye, it's just range time." Rachel shook it, firm, unflinching. "Keep them safe, Cole." He grinned. "I will, but don't expect anyone to fill your shoes." She smirked. "They shouldn't, they should make their own." She climbed into the truck, the door shutting with a quiet finality that echoed louder than any gunfire. As the vehicle rolled out toward the horizon, the base slowly faded behind her, the hangars, the tower, the students she'd rebuilt from ashes. She didn't look back. Not because she didn't care, but because she finally could move forward. Weeks passed. Her new life began in the foothills outside Kandahar, a rehabilitation center that smelled like antiseptic and hope. Every day, veterans shuffled in, blind soldiers, amputees, trauma cases, the kind of people the world forgot once the headlines faded. Rachel worked with them quietly. She built simple drills, breathing exercises, micro-movements, visual tracking routines. To the untrained eye, it looked nothing like combat training. But to those who understood, it was everything combat had taken from them: focus, stillness, control. She'd walk among them, adjusting their grips, steadying trembling hands. "Slow down," she'd say gently. "You can't heal in a hurry." At night, she'd sit alone in her office, the walls lined with photos of her students, old and new. Faces once marked by despair now smiling, rebuilding, living. Sometimes she'd take her rifle from its case, not to shoot, but to clean it. The familiar ritual soothed her, a meditation of motion and memory. Each stroke of the cloth across steel whispered stories only she could hear. One evening, Harrison appeared at the door. He was off duty now, civilian clothes, older, but still carrying the quiet discipline she'd drilled into him years ago. "Didn't expect visitors," Rachel said, leaning her cane against the desk. He smiled. "Didn't come as a visitor, came as a student." "Still learning." "Always," he echoed. He handed her a small box, wooden, hand-carved. "We made this for you." Rachel opened it. Inside was a single spent cartridge, polished to a mirror shine. Etched into its brass casing were 3 words: control, patience, purpose. She stared at it for a long time, the corners of her mouth lifting into something small, fragile, and real. "You kept learning," she said softly. Harrison nodded. "Because you kept teaching." Months later, a letter arrived. No return address, no insignia, just her name, handwritten in precise script. She opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph of a young woman in uniform, kneeling at a rifle range. The caption read, "Ghost Eye Student, Class 9." On the back, a note: Ma'am, I never met you, but my instructor said your lessons built this program. I was injured last year, almost gave up. Your story kept me going. I can shoot again now, not to kill, but to focus. Thank you for giving us our aim back. Rachel read the words twice, then set the photo on her desk beside the polished cartridge. For a long time, she just stared at them both. Then she whispered, "That's enough." Winter came. The rehab center quieted down. Snow dusted the foothills outside, softening the hard edges of the earth. One morning, Alina visited. She found Rachel sitting near the window, sunlight pouring across her desk, logbook open before her. "Writing again?" Alina asked. Rachel smiled without looking up, just finishing something. Alina stepped closer. "What are you writing?" Rachel tapped her pen against the page. "A new manual, not for the military, for the ones who come after, the ones who don't yet know that being broken doesn't mean being done." Alina nodded, tears threatening. "You think they'll listen?" Rachel met her gaze. "If they don't, someone else will teach them. That's how legacies work." That night after Alina left, Rachel went outside. The air was crisp, the stars endless, the kind of silence that felt earned. She looked up at the sky and thought of Thompson again. Of the crater, the dust, the screams, and how far she'd come since. "You were right," she murmured. "We don't choose the fight, we just choose not to look away." Her leg trembled beneath her, pain flaring sharp and deep, but she didn't sit down. She stood there until the stars blurred from tears she didn't bother to wipe away. Then she whispered the same words she'd told her students so many times before. "Steady hands, steady heart." And smiled. Weeks later, Harrison received a small package at Chapman. No note, no sender. Inside was a weathered logbook, her handwriting filling every page. At the very end, one line stood alone. "Dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." He closed the book, tears clouding his vision. Outside the barracks, the new class of recruits was assembling for morning drills. He tucked the logbook under his arm and walked toward them. "All right," he said, voice steady. "Today we start with breathing, because before you hit a target, you have to hit stillness." They didn't know yet whose words he was quoting. But they would. They all would. In time, the legend of Ghost Eye faded into history, not erased, just absorbed. Her teachings became doctrine, her story told in quiet corners by those who understood what strength really was. Not the loud kind. The kind that limps through pain, still moving forward. And somewhere in a small classroom in the desert, her voice still echoed soft, patient, unwavering. "You don't need to walk straight to stand tall." And that was how she was remembered. Not as the woman who killed 7 snipers. Not as the soldier who made the impossible shot. But as the one who showed them that courage doesn't roar, it whispers, "Try again." And in that whisper, entire generations learn to aim again. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.